All right, y'all have before you the minutes of our March 20th meeting. Do I hear a motion to approve?
So moved.
I'll second that.
Do we have any corrections, misspelled words, anything?
There you go.
If not, all those in favor of the minutes? Unanimous? All right, we have public comment for non-agenda items. I don't know. Ms. Kim, if you will come up.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am Kim Alexander. I am the chairman for the Ag Advisory Board that you guys so kindly saw to put in place several years ago. And it's just, I've not come before you before to really discuss anything, but I felt the need to, with it being the first of the year, sort of kind of first quarter's over. I know we've kind of had a fast first quarter there, but just to let you know that we're here as an Ag Advisory Board to help planning, to do our job to help you guys with whatever issues you might have with agriculture, especially since the Ag Task Force has now finished. I don't know if any of you guys have that report or have looked at that report. They presented to council last time, and I believe it is on the council's website and agenda, behind the agenda with backup items, I mean. So just wanted to kind of introduce myself and say that we're here. A couple of the highlights in the Ag Task Force, not the advisory, but in the Task Force final report were some action items for the Ag Advisory Board, which has to come from you guys with those action items. One of those were ag preservation districts. There was a couple of other things that were noted in there as well that the Ag Advisory Board was to help with. And so that is why I'm here, and to answer any questions. I know Mr. Pearson had talked to me at one meeting, had mentioned that you guys were considering changing the rule of one and where ag, I think it's ag residential now, you can have one house per acre. And he wanted to change it to 1 per 5 acres and change some language and some other things. And I think those are great changes, but let me just say this. If we change anything in agriculture to help preserve it, and let's just hypothetically say that it is 1 in 5 or 1 in 10, the concern that I have, and where I would come to you at, the minimum to be able to zone is 50 acres. And as long as that's 50 acres, how does it matter if it's 1 in 5, or if I only have 5 acres, if it's 1 in 5 or 1 in 10 or whatever? I still got to find, my thought process was I still got to find 10 people to go with me to get the zoning that I need. So one way, and I think it was pointed out in the task force report, was to have ag preservation districts. And I think that is probably where I would like to see the Ag Advisory Board go first. But we can't do anything because we're just advisory without your blessing and your direction. So I guess I'm really here for direction, and then to say we're here to work and we want to preserve agriculture. I think it's great that our agricultural commissioner, Mr. Hugh Weathers, made the announcement that agriculture is the #1 industry in South Carolina. I know we're #1 in poultry in Oconee County. Number 4 and 5, I think we've hit the past couple of years. Maybe Mr. Williams, you can help me since you're chair of the Cattlemen's Association in cattle industry for beef production. I know Anderson's #1, so when you're sitting side by side, you got to be pretty close because you're doing a lot of trading out and back at the sale. I just think it's important that we preserve as much as we can because the one commodity that is not being produced anymore is land. So I'm here if you have any questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can we ask questions now?
Can I ask a question?
Clarify ag preservation for me.
Ag preservation, is to keep the land continuing to be preserved for agriculture, to be used and worked for agriculture. Whether that is beef production, whether that's chicken houses, whatever it is, we need to preserve it to continue to work the land for agriculture, to produce.
So how are we gonna entice landowners to do that? Because there lies the issue. You know as well as I do, a lot of landowners, most of them have no retirement plan, no health insurance, so their out is to take the $15,000 they're being offered for their land, even though that's their very last option they want. So how do we preserve property, which means, first of all, we gotta keep it.
Right?
So I think there's lots of people out there that's in mine and your shoes that wanna be in ag production, that want to do it. The place is where are we gonna do it?
And I agree with you 110%. I'll be very honest with you, the property's sitting right behind me, a farm, and I've been watching it. We had 3 farmers pass away recently in our area, right up the road from me on 11. And they're wanting $22,000 per acre, $1.2 million. And when you look at what's usable and what's not usable, there's not a lot of usable. And I mean, it's great for what we use it for. But my question is, how are you going to change it? I understand what you're saying. And you're right, that's what they're looking for. Or the inheritance, that's what they're looking for. I don't have a good answer for that. I wished I did. But somehow that land has got to be, farmland has got to be valued for what it's worth, and what it's worth as far as agriculture is concerned. Because as long as developers come around, can't blame the farmer whenever they're coming up. And so that's where I would like to say, what are the restrictions on subdivisions? What are the restrictions, when you approve a subdivision, when you approve as planning, when you approve all this to happen, that requires more EMS. We're already 49 short in our county right now of employees. We don't have enough deputies. There was a complaint brought to council, and I felt for them last time, discussing litter, but the litter officer can't be the litter officer because he's a deputy on patrol. They can't hire enough deputies to cover. The more people we bring in with subdivisions, the more that's going to strain on, it's already straining our court system. They can't get them processed quick enough in the courts to get them bonded back out. The deputies can't arrest them. EMS is covered up. So how do we slow that process to allow our farmers to continue farming? That's my question back.
Well, you've brought up a point that I've been preaching for my last year and a half on this board, is our growth is way too fast for the infrastructure that we have. But the elephant in the closet for agricultural is we're control-free. And that's why we're losing. As agricultural people, we're losing the battle because we're control-free.
But in our comp plan, Mr. Williams, if you look at it, it clearly states that there's, and it's not, unfortunately for me, it's not my area. But I also realize that the commercial farmers are in the area that has already been, and I'm talking about the Beaver Dam Creek area, preserved for agriculture. And there's already thousands of acres of land that has already been zoned agriculture in that area. I would like for us to look at those areas, and I would love for you to look at my area. If you can protect us so that we can stay agriculture. That's all that we're asking. I don't know how you, the elephant in the room, how you continue to keep it that way whenever we don't value the product that we have.
Well, we do value our product.
Yes.
And I'm sure as Rex does too.
I mean, we do, but what I'm
Yeah.
saying as a
Yeah.
whole, I'm not. Yeah.
But
So,
I got one more quick question for you. The ag
advisory?
advisory committee,
Yes.
no, the ag
Task force?
Task force, thank you, I couldn't think of the word.
Two separate things.
Okay, you was on that committee, right?
Yes.
Do you know how many people responded to that,
To the,
to the questionnaire?
to the questionnaires. You know, I asked that question, and I actually printed part of that out, and I asked James. I noticed that a lot of those that responded, and I'll just be very honest, were ones that I sent. I started reading through there, and I was like, wait a minute, I sent that. It was like the Ag Advisory people. It was like the ones that I knew and had sent out. And I don't know that we saw all of them. I was told that we did. And I'm sure that was the case at that time, but I don't know how many more came in or the others on that.
Okay,
Do I think it's enough to answer your question?
well,
Can I say, do
Go
I
ahead.
think it's enough? The answer to that's no.
Right.
And I would like to say, the initiative that the Ag Advisory Board took after that was, and I guess I should have started with that, is we have taken our meetings out into the districts. We went to District 5 last month. We will be back here next week. We plan to go to District 3 in May. But what I will tell you in District 5 was, I felt, and Rex can speak to it if that's okay, Mr. Chairman, and if James would like, he was there as our staff liaison. We had over 20 people in attendance.
Close to.
And they were all very vocal. And they told us what they wanted, what they would like to see happen with agriculture, and the direction they would like to see it go. And it's not in the direction we're going.
so most of those folks, I would assume, did not respond to the task force questionnaire,
No.
which I didn't because I never saw it. Now, maybe Frankie, he said he emailed it to me, and he may have, and you know how emails go. But I got 98 members in my Cattlemen's Association that not one saw the questionnaire. So my point being is I know now the county's already got the information they want. You know, it came out in the council's favor, but it is not a true representation of agriculture in this county. Would you agree with that? I mean, I'm not putting you on the hot seat, but I don't.
I will say, and I have read through the report. The report was for what information she had, the report was fair. From the information that we received at our meeting in March, the two do not really match.
Okay, thank you.
They do not match.
Right.
And I think that as an Ag Task Force chairperson, my job is to go to them. Here's the thing with farming. I'm just going to be very honest. I had to remind myself that y'all were meeting tonight because we have another meeting tomorrow night.
Well, I'm with you. I had to quit what I was doing to come.
Right. So
And people that's not in agriculture don't understand that,
So
you know.
I made the phone call to somebody else that's got to go feed. Somebody else needs to go catch up, and somebody else several things have to happen at the Alexander farm in order for Kim to be here.
I understand.
That is the issue you have with farmers. Farmers farm 24/7. No, we're not hobby farmers in the lower end of the county. I heard that statement, it kind of hurt. That particular weekend, before that meeting and that comment was made, I was sitting in line to get hay twice with 6 trucks from Fieldale backed up trying to get chickens loaded and feed to 10 chicken houses. Everybody was working. And that's what people need to understand. It's not a 9 to 5. It's not even a 8 to 5. It's of whenever we start in the morning till we get done at night. And that's the facts.
Well, I appreciate you bringing up the point that the task force, the survey is terribly inaccurate. And I made a comment that it was a slap in the face of agriculture, and I truly believe that's correct. And I also think that maybe the committee should recommend to council from the ag side that survey should be taken again. Now, what that will change, I don't know, but because like I said, council got the answer they were looking for. Agriculture is not important in this county. But us that are in it are very important. Just like you said, we're number one in boiler protection, number one in the state, and that's huge money. And, you know, we don't ask for tax incentives, we don't get, you know, as far as, you know, a big industry can come in, Mr. Nix here is $1 billion industry guy, and they'll bring one in and give them every tax break in the world. I wasn't picking on you, I just, but one of those $1 billion industries is gonna take up a huge farm, and, I'll stop there because I'll get on my soapbox. But thank you so much for what y'all do, Rex. I appreciate what y'all do, and hopefully that I can be some more service to you.
And I will just say this, if the survey is what the planning commission chooses for us to go after more, if James has it and wants to send it, we'll be happy to try. But what we decided to do is to take the information that we had, Mr. Williams, and go to each district. I don't know, I'm sure we're going to hear similar things in every single district. And just so you guys know, we went to 5 first because I felt like we were putting fires out. 3 is going to be affected as well. We will go to 4 after that, and I believe we're going to 4 in June, if I'm not mistaken. July is going to be 2. I believe that's your district, Mr. Williams. And then the last district we will go to will be 1, which is the Salem district. And kind of did that based on the number of larger farms we have. I know we have commercial hog production, it's right in my backyard. I know we have that in our area, and I know we have a few commercial beef. But I felt like we needed to go to the areas that needed to be heard from, that hadn't been heard from. If having another survey would help people's minds, I'll be happy to do whatever you guys direct. But understand this, we serve at the direction of the Planning Commission. So you guys, we basically serve it under your direction and then to council in the way we're set up in
Is that
structure.
correct? I thought the supervisor instructed this survey, and she is.
We serve under you guys. The task force.
Y'all serve under us, yes.
The
Yeah,
task
okay.
force was just totally the consultant.
Okay.
But we have information, so my question is, where do you want us to go with it?
Where you plan on going for District 4?
District
meeting.
4 will be wherever Ashley Townsend chairs. So what I did, I guess I should back up and explain. Whoever chairs that district is responsible for securing the site and making sure that we have enough places to meet. We tried to centralize it. Charlie Whiten was District 5, and he chose the Farm Cafe, which I think everybody knows where Powell Brothers is on 24, or on 59, sorry, right off of 24. Rex has chosen with District 3 the Farm Center. That's kind of in the center of the county.
See, the farm center to me would cover some of District 4 as well, because it's right close. But District 4, your biggest agriculture up there is gonna be in Long Creek.
And that's where she may choose to host it, is she may choose, she works closely with Mr. Hollifield and she works for Mr. Land. So she hasn't told me, but I'm sure we will find out. It may be at the fire department or Chattooga Bay, I'm not sure.
Well, they've got a building right beside the fire station, right there, the community center, I guess that's called, it can be used. But please let me know where that meeting's going to be.
James is going to, as soon as we know, he has been advertising our meetings for us. And we've been trying to do flyers and get the word out in that community.
But I'd like to attend that one as well.
Okay.
So.
And you guys are welcome to attend all, I'm sure you know, if you would like. So anyway, I didn't mean to overstay my welcome.
No, I have a question, quick, are you done?
Go ahead.
You mentioned the 50 acres, and that's for self-zoning.
Yes, ma'am.
Are you talking about self-zoning when you have these meetings?
We are. We actually had, and James can attest that, we had several people come up and request the paperwork for those zonings. And we are trying our best to get as many people to self-zone and decide how they want to zone their area.
It's my understanding, James, correct me, that the 50 is not set in stone. Can that,
It is what is in the ordinance currently, so that is what the standard is now.
would it help to reduce that or not really?
a recommendation to council, and council could increase it, they could decrease it.
Do you sense an appetite for self-zoning at a certain level, or? I'm under the impression there's an education piece missing here, that people don't fully understand
I agree.
benefit
Right.
to self-zoning, because really it protects you from your neighbors, does it not?
It
Yeah.
does. And here's the other thing. So there's and it's not here, there is a map that's kind of, was it pink? And we found it, I should have brought it. It says agricultural in Oconee County, but what that is, it's not zoned agricultural land in Oconee County. It is land
Is that it behind you back there?
Yes. That is land that the owners are getting agricultural exemption in the county, but they're not zoned agricultural.
Right.
A lot of those parcels are sitting within our city limits, and they're within the cities. So I don't know how they would ever zone, that's what I was meaning by, I don't know how they would, and I think a lot of people they don't understand the difference. Well, the county says I'm agricultural. Well, that's great on your
And
taxes.
for your taxes, right?
But that has nothing to do with your zoning. But I don't want to be zoned. Well, okay.
A lot of that is if you've got 5 trees on your property, and you've got 5 acres, you can be taxed as agricultural land. Because you've got enough land and you've got trees growing, so they take that as agricultural, so it's taxed on that side, but it's not zoned for that. I mean, it's not zoned agriculture, it's just taxed as agricultural land.
Right. And I think that is where there is a misrepresentation, because people think that that's protecting agricultural, and it's not. It's just the way you're taxed on your property.
Teresa brought up a good point. It is an educational issue, because Teresa and Mr. Johnson, is anybody else there? Or just us three? James was there. James done a wonderful presentation to the Cattlemen Association at our annual meeting in December, and it was like talking to a bunch of fire hydrants. I mean, they wanted to hear it, but they didn't know what they heard. And I've had a little bit of interest in it, but the word zoning just scares people to death, because they think the government's getting involved in their business. And but we do really need to make a push quickly to educate our property owners and agricultural producers, the ones that are actively agricultural,
And that's where I think if, under your direction, if we could look at the areas that do have, like if we connected on 11, we don't, we're about 6 miles apart. But if your farm and our farm, and we said, okay, we want this to be ag preservation, this is hypothetical, don't anybody put words in my mouth. But if the council would look at protecting that area, that's where I think it's got to come from. The preservation has got to start there to protect our farmers. So that's all I was.
As far as saying something, I really think that I've listened to so many things, and I've been involved with it for 4 years. I think marketing is the biggest thing. The misconception, the lack of information. I think that some group has got to sit down and put together a sales pitch, for lack of a better word, that clearly outlines and explains what this is, because it's such a protection mechanism. And you're right, people hear zoning
And they run.
they don't want to hear it. And I think that's the problem of the salesperson, not the problem of the messages not being given correctly. And I think it's a matter of sitting down and making that message understandable.
Mr. Nix?
I was discussing with one of my friends this issue, and I don't want to give anybody away, so I'll try not to make this very specific, but I have a specific example of a guy who owns roughly 400 acres in South Union Precinct, and he has 2 kids that are not interested in farming. And he wants he wants to leave the farm to his kids with the stipulation that the land stay in agriculture. And it's a cattle farm. And so the question is, how do we educate this individual on what he can do? What do we tell him?
Yeah, I would tell him to set up a trust. I mean, it's kind of what we've done with ours. Can't sell it unless you all agree. Can't do this, can't do that. There are some really good attorneys in this county that know those backwards and forwards. And then I would tell him to offset so that his children don't just throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak, and get rid of the farm. Start looking for what's out there. The problem is a lot of our OCCB is one of those. They don't have the money to back up whenever they come to them for conservation bank. But if you put it in a conservation bank, then the kids can have a little bit of that inheritance right there, and then the farm is still secure and it would stay in agriculture. That's how I would educate them, but
The only issue with that, and I've seen it in many counties, is it all sounds great for that property owner, but that property owner is still going to get raped and pillaged by the politics of the area, and this is why. As a realtor, it's not my job to go look at deeds and trusts of other properties. But it might be my job if I'm taking a buyer to a subdivision to say, hey, there's a chicken farm or a cattle farm just over the tree line because it's zoned that way. I am required if there's particular needs from a zoning standpoint. Problem is if they don't create that zoning and it's just in a trust, the developer's going to come in, he's going to build a subdivision, and while there is a state right to farm act, you're going to have 200 homes with voters bending some councilman's ear that says, there's this stinkiness going on, it's unsatisfactory, it's this or that, and all of a sudden, what I've seen in other counties, mainly with apple orchards, is you can't spray if the wind's blowing more than 2 miles an hour. You can't feed or do this on a certain day, and all of a sudden, their farming can't function because of the other rules that then take place on it. So if it's zoned, the realtor, when he goes into those 200 homes, is telling the buyer in the card, just so you know, there is an active working farm just over the tree line. It's clearly zoned, it's in public record, and that's one of the benefits of zoning.
right.
And it doesn't show up at all if it's a trust or a conservation or anything else.
And I guess I should have backed up and said, make sure it's zoned first, but then the other things to follow.
Well, I want to, for your information and his answer to his question, there's lots of young guys out there that want to farm.
There are.
They can't pay $15,000, they can't pay $10,000, they can't pay $7,000 for land. But there's lots of incentives out there for young people to get in farming. Basically, there's loans out there, they throw money at them if they can find something that they can buy. So this particular landowner, if his heart is to keep the farm and keep it in agriculture, he could find that buyer selling that land for $4,000 or $5,000 an acre and get it. There's ways, Dave,
Or
But-
if he wanted to keep it, he could lease it with an
yeah,
option.
there's ways
and-
around it, that's
and
right.
still have that owner, and it would still transfer like he wants it to transfer.
I think the biggest problem for the preservation is not this particular example. It's the example where the generational farmer decides he doesn't want to farm it anymore and he does want to sell it. He doesn't want it zoned. What do you do about that?
Zoning is not 100%, I mean, it's not, once you're zoned agriculture, it's not that you can't change it.
You can change it, yeah.
It can always be changed to something else. You just cannot never go back to control-free.
Remember, once you put it in a conservation trust, you
You
can't go
can't.
back. It
That's where you
devalues the
can't.
property for sale.
Yeah.
So,
But just zoning it
it's not a
agriculture
simple answer.
would protect it, and then if he wanted to sell it to whoever, they could actually petition the county to say, okay, we no longer are farming here, I want to change this to residential. But you never can go back to control-free, but you could go back to a lesser restrictive classification and do something else with the land.
As long as you've got greater than 50 acres, which I think it ought to be less, but as long as you've got greater than 50 acres, you can make that decision on your own, correct?
You can do that on your own. The 50 acres was just a number they pulled out of the air, I think, because you can't do spot zoning, so you can't have 5 acres and zone it agriculture or anything else, because that's just so small, and you'd have, in a 50-acre plot, you might have 10 different zoning classifications, and the state considers that spot zoning, so they wanted it big enough to you have an area that's big enough to zone, rather than, we could send up a request to council, say, we'd like to change it to 30. But I wouldn't go much less than that, because it goes back into that spot zoning thing, Mike.
So a lot of the spot zoning too, unless I'm wrong, is from a top-down standpoint. If council comes through and says, you're being zoned this, you're being zoned this, you're being zoned this, because now you've just taken, using the example of dollar per acre, and told this owner, you're no longer gonna get 20,000 an acre, we're gonna make it so you can only get 5,000 an acre. And now you're penalizing individuals here and there. I do think that whether it's contiguous land that makes up a certain amount of acreage or one parcel, that we could create criteria that's less than 50 acres to help preserve some of that land. All that being said, and not to squelch on this, but I really think that we ought to have this group be presenting to us once a quarter at the very least. This is actually a non-agenda item, 4-minute conversation, and we're making a good discussion out of it. But I think it's worthy of actually having a speaker in a meeting time about this.
I'm fine with it, and I'm sorry.
No, I don't mean to put it that way. I'm saying it's actually something we should be discussing on a regular basis.
And I'll be happy to come back next month. I don't know that if you guys have had a chance to look at that report, or if you want to look at it, but there are some things in it that I think could help steer maybe the direction. I know what you said, Mr. Williams, but there are some positive things in there, like the Ag Preservation District, that recommendation. There are some things in there that do ask the county to spend money, like the part where they have an agricultural person. I've been told it's not that the budget request was to take the temperature in the room. I don't want to take the temperature in the room. I want to work with farmers. I want somebody that's going to, and it's not just farmers. You're a real estate developer. I'm not saying that all development is bad. I'm not saying that all industry is bad, but I think the comp plan looks at some of that. There's certain strategic areas things can go, and I think at some point, common sense has to prevail. I have to believe it exists in this county and with our government. But I think we need somebody. James needs help, not just necessarily another planner, but sometimes, you're talking about education, sometimes it's the customer service piece that's got to come into play. The customer service piece of zoning is not a bad word completely. I know I'm not marching, I'm not carrying the popular voice there, but I do think we need to help people understand and help people preserve their farms if we can. Because it was the #1 industry that was here. I live on a century farm 150 years ago, and hopefully it will continue to be here.
Question, do y'all want to have her, or as many of the board members want to come at our second meeting in May and discuss?
I'll be honest, I started a presentation, but then I thought that
Well,
I didn't need to
they can,
for this one, so I
they can
stopped.
give us some more information, and we can have a discussion at that point of what.
I would love to know what the survey should have looked like, what the word of mouth survey is going in what direction, And if we're in charge of this, that we should be in charge of this.
Sound good?
Sound good?
Was that acceptable? I mean, y'all come back to our second meeting, which would be,
Let me ask a question right quick. Will you have another one of the community meetings before then?
No, in May, what's the date?
Well, in this
We'll have
month,
one in May. It would be before their second meeting in May.
So yes, we would have one more. We would have District 3, which
Okay,
is
so you'll have
Rex's
some more
district.
information compiled,
Yeah.
possibly. Okay.
Yes.
and when's that date of that meeting?
I'm sorry?
District 3, when's that meeting?
That meeting is May the
10th.
10th? Okay. No, I don't think that's right. I think it's the
I'm
8th.
sorry, wrong page.
8th. Our meeting next week will be May the 10th, and we will discuss everything, and I will report to them basically what you guys have informed me of.
and our
And
second
then-
meeting is the 15th.
And then our May meeting will be before your second meeting, and we will try to bring you more information. And maybe a report from District 5 and a report from District 3, along with some other information. And in the meantime, I'm happy if you guys want to email me and/or call me. I'll be happy to do whatever there. I'm pretty flexible. Just give me a little bit of time to get back to you. But I will be happy to work on things.
Is there anything coming up?
No, but two clarifications on just stuff that's being said. So, the invitation to all of them, if they're gonna invite all of the Ag Task Force, we need to advertise that as their meeting as well. So 3 or less, to keep it without a quorum for your official meeting with them, or.
If
you
there's
just
gonna
get a
be
combined
more,
meeting.
then yeah. I mean,
That's up.
do y'all want all the board, or you just want,
Have you guys ever met, like, Ms. Spicer, I'm with you?
I know, we've not met.
No, we haven't. Actually, I told Gwen that the other day, because I haven't met her, but I know a lot about her because I watch, but I haven't met. And I came back on during the pandemic, so I apologize
Okay.
for that. But I don't know, District 2, I'm sorry, Mr. Nix, you're without a representative.
I do have one now.
You do? Okay,
I do.
okay.
He's back.
No, I
On
mean,
ag.
you're without
Oh,
a
ag. I'm
ag
sorry.
representative. I'm so sorry.
It's so infatuated.
I was,
Non-specific communication.
sorry, my
apologies.
miscommunication.
Understand. I'll address that with our county councilman.
And let me say this in his defense. He and I had discussed it prior to, and it was not his fault, the reason we went without one. I want to state that for the record. He was working on it, and in his defense, he didn't have time to fix it. So he was. Let me make sure I say that. And Ashley Townsend, Mr. Pearson, yours, you know Ashley. And y'all know Rex, District 3.
all right, do y'all wanna have a meeting with the entire board, or do you wanna just do,
Whoever, that's fine.
that way we can,
Presenter.
Yeah, just be you.
Presenter.
so
Presenter.
let's make it 3 or less. Then we'll, if we need, in the future, we'll meet and have a strategic meeting, whatever you wanna call it, with the entire board, and we'll have, that way we can advertise 2 different meetings,
Okay,
or each
that's
one for
fine.
each.
And I don't want to add to y'all's stress or anything, but if y'all have a chance to look at this,
Is there any way we could get that distributed electronically via email, Mr. Cullen?
That'd be great.
and James, I think it was the October, task force meeting that had the surveys that had come in at that point?
I have to go back and look. I think it was a little bit closer to the end of the year. But
Okay.
I'd have to go back and look. I don't trust my memory to go back.
Would
that
you
far.
guys like those as well?
I'd like a summary of that.
Okay, all right. Okay, we'll do what you ask.
Thank you, Kim.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank y'all for your time.
You got anything you wanna add to anything, sir?
I was thinking as y'all were talking, I'm Rex Blanton, and I'm vice chair, whatever, the ag board, been on it since it came. But you mentioned contiguous, I think it might be an idea if we make it lesser of an acreage. You mentioned 25, 30 acres, and make it where it doesn't have to be contiguous, because some people own property in different places that doesn't adjoin, so that might be something to think about. Also, the disclosure letter, it's supposed to go with each deed saying that you're buying property next to an agricultural entity, be advised of that, and, consider that, so. How's that letter was approved, I believe.
Yes.
It was not.
But what, I
You
thought-
mean from a state level?
Yeah,
It got shot down,
I did not
is
know
my
that.
understanding.
Okay, that's,
Well, let me back up. There was a state property disclosure that it was asked to be part of, and it did not become a part of that.
I think that's a worthy pursuit, though. That disclosure letter lets people know they're moving into the ag neighborhood, and
I will tell you the problem with it, and I do want to correct, I'm a real estate broker, not a real estate developer, but the problem with it is that disclosure says, you, Mr. Owner, are you aware of any nuisances? No, it was fine to me, but the buyer coming in now, they may smell a chicken house and not like it. So the vagueness of the wording can get a seller sued, and so that was why the state said, we need to be careful about the way we phrased this.
Rick, Mr. Nixon and I was having a discussion earlier, and I don't think that people that's moving into developments next to farms feel threatened to move next to an agricultural entity as the agricultural person themselves. But what happens is, over time, the tide turns, and then the people living in the development become nuisances to the agricultural person, whether it's little dogs running around or your kids riding their four-wheelers on their property. I mean, so this information thing and letting them know, I don't really get the gist of that as a agricultural person, because I don't know that with the demand for property they have now, just letting said developer know, hey, there's 8 chicken houses over there, he's gonna like, well, it don't matter, that's gonna sell anyway. So I don't really know how that's helping us.
I think it was intended to reduce nuisance complaints by the movers in, the people moving in.
And it may do, like you say, you don't ever know the fine line, you don't know what the gray areas are, but, I mean, we got a development going up right now, right next to a salvage yard over in Westminster, fixing to build 190 houses over there, I think, on Seed Farm.
130-ish,
How many?
130-ish.
130? Well, those, I mean, it's going full steam ahead with that development next to a salvage yard. Well, do you not think that eventually those 10 or 12 parcels, well, there's a salvage yard in our backyard. So they gonna start, would it not fall under the
So-
same pretense?
So again, you're answering both sides of the equation. You're talking about farming and don't understand how the disclosure applies. But it's just like with the nuisance of the junkyard. Heck, we got 87 emails the other day about the junkyard on grandfather, making sure, and we were targeting one particular junkyard. They're gonna target one particular agriculture place if that's what they wanna do, but if it has been disclosed to them, then it does provide, I would assume, and I'm not an attorney, but a legal level of protection that they knew good and well when they moved in. It's that whole squeaky wheel gets the grease, though. I mean, somebody been in a councilman's ear, when you got 200 people doing it, it's gonna carry a lot of weight, and I can
It does.
absolutely appreciate the fear of the farmer. That's why we're need to put these protections in place. But one of the things that could also be done is that's where maybe we reduce the amount. But I also think it's a sales pitch, because it's not only you trying to protect yourself, but you gotta convince your neighbor to do the same thing. Because ultimately, like you said, it's the neighbor who sells out, and now you have the barking dogs or the infringement onto your property. So it's the sales pitch of saying, we all need to do this as a community that's gonna win this over.
Thank you,
That's
sir.
just some of the thoughts I had, so thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Appreciate what you do.
Thanks.
Okay, if we have nothing further on public comment, let's move into staff comment, or commissioner comment, commission member comments.
I have one, there's one comp plan checkpoint, that's 10.2.1.3, Elise, over there. And it's explore other revenue sources to help fund in their infrastructure. And Ms. Brock was instructed by the council to go after a bond for sewer, so that's satisfied that.
What was the number one more time?
10.213.
Anyone else? If not, staff?
Yep, two quick things for you first tonight. Everybody is signed up, or almost everybody signed up for the in-service training next Tuesday. That's here, this room, 10 a.m. There'll be several folks from other counties here as well. It will be a new presenter from the COG, so it'll be Mr. Lance, as opposed to Jennifer. So hopefully it'll be some different information from a different presenter. Look forward to seeing you all there. The second thing is there is a email from me in all of your inboxes about a joint meeting with council and the sewer authority coming up in June. So please review that, see if you have availability for the full commission. That's it for me.
That's it.
That's it for me.
Mr. Chairman, can we request a 5-minute recess real quick?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
We're resuming at 6:55.
That was about 5.
Outside of 30,000 gallons a day.
That way they couldn't get it, my blueberries.
Right.
Busy Saturday and Sunday.
But
The rest of the week,
they
it's
are,
6,000.
they were something else. They was out playing this morning. It was so.
So who's gonna foot that bill? Like I said, that's crying out for it.
So your motion to reconvene?
Reconvene.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we are now back in session. Let's move on to item number 8, discussion regarding proposal of growth management diagnostic study by an outside consultant. You have the proposal in the backup here. This was, we had a meeting, me, the vice chair, Mr. Johnson, and James had a video meeting, if you want to call it that, whatever you call those things.
Zoom meeting.
Yeah, one of those. And to set up give them what we wanted, what we were looking for, what help we needed, instead of them doing a broad thing. We had specific things that we were concerned with. And I think we've talked about them in our meetings, and then they came back with the proposal, which you'll see on page 3 here. We talked to them about I did 5 meetings, one in each district, with the public. They're gonna help with those. We would still like a representative for planning commission to be at those meetings. But we get the public's input,
Can I add to that conversation when you're done?
and then they would go look at what little bitty ordinance we have and give us recommendations on what to improve, what not to put in there, and such as that. And then they, for a little more money, they would actually write everything up. I'm taking it, would they not, James? They would actually write it, but I don't think we need that. We have an attorney, he can do that part of it. Write the actual ordinance and improve them. They can give us recommendations on how to improve these ordinances to make them have a little teeth, to manage the growth, rather than let it just run wild. Mr. Johnson.
For anybody who may be watching the video for the first time, just to give a little preface, this committee back at the end of the year was there were conversations about controlling development, having more development standards, controlling development, dealing with density, dealing with zoning. And the conversation was had of how do we go about doing this? Surely we're not the only county in the United States with this issue of being behind the 8 ball with development happening faster than our county ordinances allow for. And so there was the instruction to reach out to someone and say, to an outside facilitator and say, are you familiar with doing this in other areas that are struggling with similar things, and how did you go about it if there's not an appetite for zoning in the county? And several points that were made here were, myself included, was we've got several elements in this conversation. Do we as a committee try to take this under our own wing and go out there? And if we do so, do we artificially influence it by saying, well, this is an important component to me, whereas somebody else, that might be an important component to them. And now we artificially influence a district because we're coming in with a predisposed idea of what that meeting the agenda of that meeting should be. Because as we've talked about this, we've talked about density, we've talked about how does that affect affordable housing, we've talked about so many elements, but there are definitely other counties that are having issues, and this company is somebody who says, hey, we've dealt with counties that like yours that are behind the 8 ball, and they're trying to slow this progress, and this is how it was done. We've also worked with counties who had much advanced planning, and this is how it was done. And the biggest benefit to us in this would be that it's not coming from any one of us, and it's not coming from any one of council. It's simply a facilitator that's letting the community voice speak to us about their concerns. So,
That's what I was saying.
What's the time frame? What time?
James?
Post award would probably be 4 to 5 months, what we talked about.
I will say that they had originally come back with a price that was double this and a workload that was half of this. And
Where is the bid?
In the back. I have a comment. As I read this, all right, task 1, community meetings. 3 community meetings spread out. As I read this, I said, this sounds pretty familiar, and it seems to be on a smaller scale exactly what we did at the comp plan.
It is.
500 citizens attended meetings, 10,000 addresses where surveys were mailed to, 14 initial focus groups, stakeholders, 20 planning commission meetings dedicated to this company. So I find this redundant. I wouldn't pay for that again, to be honest. Ordinance recommendations, I have a feeling we know what ordinances need to be made, or zoning recommendations, but I don't know if this commission or the council has the will to do that. So that's why we're looking for bottom up and rather than top down zoning. So I think we know about how to do an ordinance. I just don't think we're achieving that. And then, so I wouldn't pay for that either. And I mean, the cost of this is the cost of a deputy's salary. I just think that's a lot of money for something that the comp plan provides a lot of this. There's future, in the transportation element and the future land use, those go together. That can guide you with any zoning you want to do. I'm going to vote against this. I don't think it's worth the money, to be honest.
This is for development standards. This is for developers to give them a guideline of saying, okay, you bought this land, you want to develop it into homes. These are the rules you got to go by. We're not zoning that property. We're just managing a business in this county, and developers are a business. Once they buy the land, start building houses, they are an actual business. They're not an individual person. They're not your average person that lives right down the street from you. These guidelines that we're wanting to do are for businesses. And I don't know that any one of us has went to school as a planner. These people actually went to school. They're supposed to know what they're doing, but we also need to get the community involved, because it's not, all of this land is not ours. It belongs to everyone in Oconee County, and we get them involved to find out what their views are. But this has nothing to do with zoning per se. This is development standards to manage how developers take the land and clear cut it and cut it down to the subsoil and destroy our land, and then 2 or 3 years later, get in their vehicle and haul butt back to Florence or Greenville or wherever they're from, and they don't have a stake in the game, and they could care less. They just want to make their money. This gives them guidelines to follow, and I think we do need help. But I don't think any one of us have the education to come up. We can look at an ordinance and go, yeah, I don't like that, let's change it. May not be the right thing. These people know what they're doing. And for this, again, like Mike said, this is about half of what they originally came up with. And I think it's a good idea.
I don't have a dog in the fight. Doesn't matter to me, budget or not budget. I do hold very true to my statement of, we all have individual agendas, just as is shown. Ms. Spicer, you're saying, I know what to do here, but I can assure you, the development knowledge that we've discussed here is very minimal as far as what you do understand about it. As far as some of the development stuff that we're trying to accomplish or not trying to accomplish, and I don't mean, let me back up, I'm not trying to point you out. None of us here have it to the point of dictating what the community at large is asking of us. I think that by going back through and doing something similar to the comp plan, whether we do it or whether we have somebody else do it, is important, because the comp plan, unless you can point out to me where it is, did not anywhere account for the growth pattern that we're having at this point.
There's a future land, all that's in the future land use chapter.
One chapter that is generic, that was pulled out of 14 other comp plans. So I really think that whether we do it or somebody does it, we need to get the community's input to say, what are we seeing as the problem? I've asked up here 6 times, please give me 5 bullet points of development standards that people see, and nobody has yet to be able to give 3. I've heard everything from, well, the emergency room is too busy, we need to stop development, to there's too much traffic, to I don't like the trees being cut down. But whether we do it or somebody else does it, we need to get a hold of this, because that's our job as planning.
Can I say something, sir?
Go ahead, Pat.
I think we gotta keep in mind that we are an advisory council, and county council usually has final say-so of everything. So what's their feelings on this? Do we know if we spend $43,120, will they take that recommendation? Because they obviously don't want any headwinds in front of development in this county, especially with preserving, I'm gonna throw that word out there, I've been told that I use it too much, especially protecting agriculture. And I don't see anything on here that says anything about protecting agriculture, and I know it don't even have a stakeholder focus group meeting that says with agriculture. And you bring a young guy here, just got out of college, that grew up in, said city, and he don't have a heart for ag at all. So how is he going to fairly give an assessment on preserving or promoting agriculture in the county? So I'm kind of with Ms. Spicer. I think it's wasted money. It would garner us a lot of information, a lot of good information, Mr. Johnson. But will county council listen to it? Will they take it in advisement?
If we don't put it in front of them, they won't.
Right.
We clearly know that.
I agree with you there 100%.
So if we nix it here, then we nix it.
Right.
And again, it doesn't matter, I don't have a dog in the fight. I'm just saying that this is one instrument that could be used if we've sat here and had 4 meetings and we're about to discuss more of it on a group that has no understanding of development.
I agree with you 100%. But I think that's our weak point is we're an advisory council. And I just don't know that we have enough
Go ahead.
of influence to guide council on some things that we think are important. Because we've sent some really good suggestions, some really good agenda items to them, and they shoot them down.
I don't disagree. It is our job, though, in my opinion, as planning, to send stuff to them. And so as we talk about these things, we need to send stuff to them. We need to be trying to come up with something. And again, whether we do that ourselves or whether we do it through this group.
Let me say one thing, Dave. We worked on the junkyard ordinance for 3 years. If we had had help, we might have got it done a little sooner. We work on this development standards for 3 years. Within 3 years, 3 to 5 years, this county is gonna be, we had 20-something last year. How many we've got so far this year?
10?
We got already 10, but if we work on this another 3 to 5 years, you're looking at 100 to 200 more developments in this county. What is it gonna look like?
I agree with you. That's why I asked about the timeline, because I don't think the timeline's in favor of what my constituents seems feasible.
Well,
So,
but like
Can I
Mr.
have the
Johnson said,
floor
we
to
got,
propose a compromise, if you'll give me 3 minutes to
Go
give
ahead.
my thoughts?
I'll shut up.
There are rising concerns across all the political spectrum about how to address high-density subdivisions, and there's an evolving willingness to do this in spite of the competing concerns of the potential bottom-up zoning and adverse impacts on housing affordability. The ordinance changes that I would like to propose to the table are simple, enactable with a short and efficient turnaround, will directly target development density concerns. They won't be perfect, however, they'll be a move in the right direction. Additionally, the proposed ordinance changes will not enact top-down zoning as so many strong pro-property rights people are concerned about. And also, since, we're pro-business, the proposed changes will still allow for a measure of predictability for prospective developers in that they will be able to determine what rules apply before they engage in a potential project in the county. So what are these proposals? We've talked about them a little bit. We'll propose that adding into Chapter 32, development standards of the county ordinances, an initial screening criteria of greater than 20 acres in size and greater than 2 houses per acre, which, for example, would be 40 or more houses for a 20-acre example, and property within the proposed subdivision is intended for resale. If a prospective development meets all of these criteria, the property will be automatically screened into the residential zoning category upon staff approval of the proposed subdivision. And then the applicable rules in Chapter 38 zoning of the Oconee County ordinances would apply. Proper regulatory structure, which addresses specific density, setback, and other subdivision requirements once a development is screened into the residential zoning, is already in place in Chapter 38 within the zoning ordinances. Is this proposal perfect? No. Just like in Greenville County, where they are constantly trying to tweak ordinances to close loopholes, the same situation would apply here in our county. It's a start. It doesn't require an expensive and possibly unclear or inconclusive urban planning study, nor does it require a complex or complete planning overhaul of our existing zoning ordinances and standards, which would likely take years to work through. Folks, we don't have years to plow through the bureaucracy if we want short-term limited fix to this issue. A similar version of this screening criteria was discussed last year in the Planning Commission. The county lawyer even said it could work as intended. The planning staff evaluated the 2022 list of subdivisions and determined that there were several high-density subdivisions which would have met the screening criteria, and therefore concluded that the new proposal could be impactful in helping to reduce development density. Therefore, I would like to urge us to consider this proposal. And it wouldn't cost us $43,000 to have somebody go do a 6-month study, and then us argue about it for another 2 years. Probably all of us will be gone. So I'm with these two guys. I don't think we need the study. I said that in the first place, and that's just my opinion.
Did you write that?
I did.
It was very well written.
Very well.
So you're saying change them over to a residential district. Which one? We got traditional rule, which gives them 2 dwellings per acre. We've got
We get to choose that.
residential district, which gives them 4 dwellings per acre. We've got rural residential, which gives them 1 house per 5, or 1 residence per 5 acres. Agriculture gives them 1 house per acre as it stands now. So and if we go highway commercial, they can put up to 6 houses on an acre. So, what district do we put them in?
We get to choose that, however we write the ordinance. I would think residential if it's a development. If it, we're talking about dense developments. We're not talking about individual property owners.
You can't just say residential, because there's 4 different types of zoning that
We
classifies
can
as
say which
residential.
residential. We can say which residential.
So, go
So
ahead.
I've got a question. We started this based on a need. Does Mr. Nix's proposal accomplish some of that need in the opinion of this group? If it does, we don't need to go to this to solve that, but we do need to solve the need. And if we feel like that we can solve that need, at least to a Band-Aid level, to something, I'm fully willing to discuss that something. But because Mr. Nix is correct, we're gonna go through this, we're gonna get the advice from this, and then we're gonna talk about it for another 6 months about it. But we do need to come up with something, whether we go a route that says, hey, here's what y'all need to be looking at, or whether we determine here's what we need to be looking at, but we need to be real careful and do just a few things. I like your comment about the 20 acres or more. We've talked about several times here that, and we've talked to the attorney about that it automatically drops them into a zoning category under certain criteria. And think those are great ideas. So, right now, this is up for discussion about this company, though. So right now, the general consensus sounds like that we're not wanting to move forward with this company to solve that need. Is that a correct
So
Do we need a
we
motion?
need a motion.
Do we? It just says discussion. I don't think that we need a motion.
Do we
We
need
just
a
kind
motion?
of, we got the information that we said we would
Yeah.
get.
I think it's a Plan B. I think Plan A is we move forward with some ordinance fixes. No, I mean, we know how to do this. We have these skill sets. And we have a planning staff that can help us and a lawyer. We don't need to spend $43,000 right now to do it.
Okay.
I mean, if we want this as a Plan B, if we come back and we say, man, that ordinance change didn't work, now we probably need to get some help.
The only problem with putting Band-Aids on things is the Band-Aid usually comes off and all heck breaks loose at that point. We need to do something more than a Band-Aid. We need to make some standards. And again, we need to work on this matrix and get it a little better. But, if that's the will, we can move on to discussion number 9, unless there's anything further.
Do we need a motion this or just,
Nope,
move on?
it
No?
was just discussion.
okay. Thank you though for trying.
All right, item 9, discussion regarding amending chapter 32 of the Oconee County Code of Ordinance by adding a provision providing for SDOT encroachment permit conditional approval prior to receiving final approval from Oconee County Planning Department. You have before you the proposed language. The floor is open for comments.
So this is the resulting paragraph from a conversation with you and the engineer that came, Joel?
Joel and David Root.
And Mr. Root.
We had a conference call and took the 10 that was adopted by council in December. This was item 10 that was for the 123 corridor. This would replace that and remove it from the 123 corridor to all state roads. And this is the state's language of receiving the conditional approval. We also took the public comments into mind and added the design to access state roads. So if they abut a state road and a county road and they choose the county road, this would not apply.
Okay.
What section of 32 is this being added to? I can't remember.
Oh, gosh, I don't have it right in front of me. Give me one second.
Did you bring a coffee maker?
It's different every time I see it.
I'm out of coffee.
State and county. We took it.
Same decision.
Feel free to continue discussion, I'll give that for you.
So the biggest thing that I had taken away from that one meeting is we wanted to make sure we used their language, and conditional approval is the language that the DOT was using, and so that sounds good to me.
I like the wording of this.
I got a concern about just where it says comments. All FC DOT comments shall be incorporated. That just don't seem strong enough to me. It just seems like it should, if DOT says, the sight line's not 300 foot or whatever, there's their minimum is, and the property owner has the out to sign away, the state's responsibility for granting them a sight line, shouldn't that word, I mean, this might be a lawyer question, but shouldn't that say
I don't know.
decision, recommendation? Just a comment don't seem to be strong enough. They
Just
can make comments now.
from a technical point of view, when you submit to DOT, they are going to give comments back on the design. The comments are what are going to be incorporated. So that's just how they tell you what you need to change, add, amend in the design you see.
Okay.
So that is.
So
essentially-
comment is their decision.
Yes.
Thank you.
Is it 32-222?
That sounds right. Yeah. And it's gonna be. And this would be C10.
Is everybody okay with the wording of this?
Okay, Mr. Nix?
We fought over this last time. I think I'm good with it.
You good to make a motion?
I'd like to make a motion that we adopt this as it's written,
Second.
and then do we present it to council for inclusion?
Senate Council would be the, yep, next step.
Second?
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous. Okay. Mr. Pat, I'm gonna let you take item 10. Is discussion regarding density and the zoning district standards of Oconee County. Ordinance, chapter 38, 38-10-2 through 3810-13.
Well, as we see residential uses where it says density and lot size, max density says not applicable.
Where are you? So if it's control free.
This is control free, that's right. Thank you, Teresa.
Yep, yep.
All right, right. I'm trying to find, I've lost my place, I'm sorry. Well, we got the one where it says 6 per acre in a development.
That one is,
Are all these residential?
Rural residential is a 5 acre. When the open 5 acre, was that your question?
the one with 6, Pat, is the highway commercial district. It's 6 dwellings per acre. That was explained to me, that would be more like an apartment building. That's not like 6 individual homes that's built on there, that'd be one long
Right.
6
Well,
unit.
my concern was with that one, and all these seem to be the residential, or the agricultural setbacks, right? Correct? Recommendation. But anyway, getting to the point, my thought would be is on in a subdivision standard, and like Mr. Nix here was talking about, we might be beating a dead horse here. I'd like to see the maximum number of dwellings on an acre in a subdivision be 4, with a setback change to 15 feet. Or on the acre, have a maximum square footage, if it's 1 house, 2 house, 3 house, but not more than 4 and I was thinking in the 6,000 to 7,000 square foot. I don't know,
That ain't very big.
Which one? Which?
Think about that lake. Do you know how many houses I built over 10,000 square feet on that lake?
well, we talking about subdivisions. Can we?
Those are subdivisions.
What is the matter?
He was asking for.
You come up.
I did ask for your input.
Come up here,
Yeah, I did.
please.
Yeah,
You're talking resident?
'Cause I can't
residential,
keep
yeah,
everything going.
yeah.
so.
So we talk, first of all, are we talking, section 38-10-7 residential district?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I was saying we were talking community commercial, so which one are we talking about, zoning category?
38-10.7. residential
Southern
district.
Residential District.
That's the one that's gonna catch, I would assume, all your high-density subdivisions.
Right.
So what do you want to, you said put 4 per acre? It
Yeah.
already is 4 per
It's
acre.
already 4 per acre, but somewhere we got something that says 6, correct?
I think so.
Okay.
Does it say anywhere 6 per acre?
Highway commercial is gonna be.
Highway commercial is 6 per acre.
Okay.
Oh, that's different. Okay.
Okay.
Go ahead, Tom.
My point is this, all those subdivisions around the lake are subdivisions. You want to envision this as being a separate thing, and that the subdivisions that are being built out in the country are a whole different mechanism. They're subdivisions. Yeah, there's high-end subdivisions, there's starter subdivisions, there's all kinds of subdivisions. And you can't start creating one set of rules for one type of housing and another set of rules for another type of housing and another set of rules, because then we get into all kinds of things with equal protection. And this has kind of been my point I understand you want to see the development that's taking place away from the lake as being different. I can assure you as a developer, development is just development. And builders are gonna come in and put houses where available lots become, and you can create all these, you can create as many rules as you want. It's not gonna change the fact that people are still gonna build. All it's gonna do is increase the price. That's all it's gonna do. And so we're not talking about how much you're gonna limit growth, we're talking about how expensive it's gonna get. That's what we're talking about. That's all I got. I'm just saying that you want to see one type of development as being different from other types of development. There is no difference. I can assure you, Kiwi Key, if that's not high density, there's a whole lot of lots in there that are less than a quarter of an acre. There's a whole lot of multifamily in there. There's places on the lake where the lots are about 60 feet wide. And they're designed so that there's only 15 feet between each resident. We've been doing this for a long time, and all of a sudden, it's kind of like, it's okay for the lake. Oh yeah, that's all right. Now, we're gonna create a whole other set of rules for people who are trying to start out, make a new life for themselves, make a new house for themselves, get it started. That's gonna be a whole new thing. I don't get it. I don't understand that.
Thank you. Okay, my main concern on the whole matrix was, the agricultural district, which is set right now at one house, one dwelling per acre. And rural residential is set, one house per 5 acres. If we're wanting to preserve agricultural land in any way, shape, form, or fashion, go the Band-Aid effect, switching those two density sizes would be that, would let rural residential build one house per acre and agricultural have one house per 5 acres. That would leave 4 acres, for the most part, usable as agricultural land. That would be a place for your barns, your corn sheds, your whatever, for the rest of that 5 acres. Instead of doing it one house an acre, if they take one house per acre on agricultural land, you got 100
What
houses,
section?
you got 100 acres, you got 100 homes.
What section are you talking about?
It'd be section 38-10-6 and 38-10-4. Go ahead.
So I would agree. I think the names are backwards and somewhat confusing, but I think it becomes an attorney question of can you change something that's already in play as far as the name? Because I would want to change it, but can you change it, I think is going to be the legal question. I think there's another component to it too, in that under that, if we said, okay, well, let's don't change it, let's leave rural residential district at one house per 5 acres, then that's what Pat needs to go back to his ag groups with and say, hey, we're not trying to zone agriculture, we're trying to zone rural residential. And it would accomplish the same thing from a density standpoint, but here's the other element to that, is could we, in SAVE, using the example of rural residential, allow somebody to self-zone, this is one house per 5 acres, if they were in this, if they wanted to go into this district, that they could have as few as 5 acres to zone themselves into, as opposed to 50. So I think there's potentially a couple of different things we could talk about. But I do think that this whole exercise shows that this is way above our heads.
So you think we need, number one, we need the attorney present before we start, going into any detail in this?
I think that the attorney needs to be able to tell us is that once these are in play, can they be changed as far as the name and the exercise of them?
James, do you know?
It's possible. I think it does create several headaches for people in that you have grandfathered places. You'll have a lot of things that maybe are gonna be non-conforming uses going forward that will potentially change. And what I was trying to look up is to see how much actual acreage is in some of these different zonings right now, and kind of what that effect would be.
Now, there's nothing to say we couldn't add one.
Right.
And again, if it makes it clear, which I would love for it to be clear, because I've been the one saying it's kind of screwed up. But we may have to deal with what we've got, but I think it's an attorney question. First and foremost.
Go ahead, Pat.
Okay.
And then I would like to see us be able to, I would like to ask the attorney, can we create certain zoning districts that can fall in less than that 50-acre requirement? Because this one would be prime. If I had 5 acres and I didn't want any growth of my property, heck, I got 4 of my neighbors who also had 5 acres, and I could convince them to do the same. I'd love to do it this way. But unless we had 50 acres of contiguous property, it ain't gonna happen.
I think that 50 needs to be, I think the 50 was good for 20, 30 years ago, but I don't think it's good for now. I think it should be changed to 30 or 20 acres, maybe 20 acres to align with what I'm proposing in the self-zoning, or in the self-zoning piece about when the developer purchases a piece of property and decides he's gonna subdivide it.
So you want to put this on the next agenda and ask the attorney to be present?
Or we ask a couple of questions to the attorney and have him send us the answers. I don't want to stall the process, but I think that the attorney, I think these are two, we can't move forward with saying, let's change this to this if we can't do that anyway.
Well, either way,
This clouds the issue of the other real pieces, and that is the high-density subdivision issue. This just clouds that up. We really need to pick on what we want to work on specifically. If we want to go address high-density subdivisions and saying that they need to at least meet residential zoning or at least some of them need to at least meet residential zoning requirements, then let's go do that. Let's do one thing at a time.
And again, we have talked about that, and it is a component. But we started it because we were losing ag land. And so as we're addressing this, the ag land component is, I would say, equally important. If we get into the zoning barrel or box, we've got more than one thing. I agree that density. Understand that it also means affordable housing
The 20
slows.
acre, reducing the 50 to 20 acres on self-zoning, along with what I propose as far as the high-density subdivisions, that'll get us at least into a position where then we can go educate the public on, instead of getting 10 5-acre parcel people together, now you only have to get 4 5-acre parcel people together to agree on self-zoning. I mean, that makes a big difference, in my opinion. Would it not?
It would, but now you're saying, so if I understand, you're saying we're self-zoning into residential, which then would fall to still a house per quarter acre.
Or they're self-zoning, if they've got 5 acres apiece, it only takes 4 people to agree on something now as opposed to 10.
But do we need to agree that the neighbors are gonna get together and say, hey, we're not gonna put more than a house per quarter acre, when, unless there's sewer, you gotta have that anyway, if not more?
They get to decide what zoning they want, period. If it's
Well, I was thinking you were saying it
agricultural,
automatically, if the developer came in, that it automatically went into a residential.
only if it's a developer buying property for commercial resale, would it fall into residential. But the 20-acre piece that has to align with what we're proposing there, that would require, or that would only require 4 or 5 acre parcel people to get together and self-zone, if they wanted to zone into agriculture or whatever.
Okay, so you're saying just give that component
helps
to anything
them.
across the board, drop it from
Yeah.
50 to 20.
He's talking about two different things.
Right, I
One is
got you.
development standards,
But
one
the
is
20
residential.
acre piece has to come with what I'm proposing, the 50 to 20 acre reduction. It has to come with what I'm proposing, or else it really don't mesh well together.
Right.
Is that still not a attorney?
Sure it is. Attorney's gonna have to determine whether or not.
What do we want?
I'd
to
be
send a
interested in
question?
seeing more along the line of what that looks like.
I agree. We need to,
I'd like to see what you said it sent to us,
okay.
if that's possible.
Can you send it
Print
to,
that out,
can you send it to
Together.
James
Send it in
email.
separately. I'll send it to James
and
and
let
then he
him send
can
it out?
separately send it out.
And you want to put this same subject back on the next agenda? Or how do we need to? You can come up with the right,
Yeah, so I
Wording or
guess the
whatever.
first question I would have for you on setting the agenda is, do you wanna talk about, I think you need to separate these two issues. The first issue, because you have development standards you're talking about, and you're also talking about rezoning standards, which,
two
if you wanna
different
talk about
things.
the rezoning, I think we need to talk about that as its own item, and reducing from 50 to 20. And then the other is the, design standard, or the standard you're talking about for automatic
The density.
zoning with, high density or higher density. I can put them both on, I can put one of them on, I can put the other one on, so.
Y'all want both?
Mr. Nix, the reason, I'm sorry,
Go ahead.
the reason I was asking to see it in writing is what I want to do is measure that against the affordable housing component. Are we penalizing that developer who's willing to build an affordable house?
We
Because-
absolutely are. But they're gonna know it before they get into it. I mean, I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. That's absolutely what we're doing. We're driving the economics to a point where it reduces high-density subdivision development. I mean,
Which
that's
then
honestly
goes
what
back
we're doing. I
to-
don't like it, but I mean, I'm hearing from the people that we want a solution, and I'm just trying to propose one that seems reasonable.
And is that the solution? Because the outcome is significantly increased prices. And and again, if that's what we want to do, if that's the voice of the people, that the people are talking about, everything comes at a cost. And that's why I want to look at it and see if this.
And the cost drives development. Or at least the density of it. The cost goes up. I mean, it's a supply and demand type situation, right?
It's just, it goes up for the existing person as well. For the person whose heritage was here, their taxes are gonna go up because the subdivision, the home prices in the subdivision next door increased their property value. And so their property value now has gone up, and so their taxes go up. Because we created something that required higher priced homes to begin with. I just wanna make sure that, I just wanna read through it and
Well,
make sure
you
we're
can
not
also look at the reverse of that is, I mean, there's offsetting things that would drive costs down. So you're gonna have less people in the development, so you're gonna have less infrastructure required, you're gonna have less fire response, all that is holding costs down in another area where it drives costs up in certain areas. I mean, you know what I'm saying? You really can't just pick one piece of that or facet of that and then say costs are gonna go up to the county. I mean, there's offsetting costs, is what I'm saying.
Gotcha. Yeah, I would love to see that in writing, would love to see it in writing.
So which one do you want on the agenda next meeting? Density or standards? Right? Or both?
Well, can I throw my head into that? 38-10-2, control-free district. That's where my focus was gonna be. Max density is not applicable. Correct?
It's control free.
It's control-free.
do
So
whatever
most
they-
of the development going on
Is
in
control.
control-free. So that's where our concern is. Our concern is where these guys have,
That's what I'm trying
I
to
think
address.
Mr. Nick solves that.
Yeah, Mr.
Trying to
Nix,
address that.
Are you trying to eliminate control-free?
No.
Is that what
No,
you said?
absolutely
this,
not.
this just takes, if you buy property in control-free area, about 200 acres, say, you're gonna develop it into a subdivision, then you automatically, by doing so, you automatically get put into a
Okay.
Only if
traditional
you
rule.
meet, only if
Well, I
you meet
mean,
certain
but
specific
200 acres,
requirements.
if you get 200 acres, you're gonna develop that whole 200 acres. You're gonna automatically go into one of the residential zoning classifications.
Now, let me just clarify. If you buy 200 acres and you say, I'm gonna put one house per acre on that, you're not gonna get put in residential. If you buy 200
100
acres and you
homes?
put 200 houses on it, you're not gonna get automatically zoned because it's not what we would call a high density.
So you're going strictly
Development.
for high density.
We're going after high density.
Send, yeah, I wanna see that.
Yeah.
that's kind of where
I need
that's
to
what
see it.
that's where my concern is in the control-free. That's where most of these developers are going.
Right.
And that's because it's control-free. So, and Mr. Markovich, in defense of what I was saying a while ago about 4 per acre in the control-free and a maximum footage, is most houses that are affordable houses are gonna be a 1,500 foot or 2,000 square foot house that most families could afford, not a 10,000 foot lake house. So that's where our difference is in that control-free zone. The density is just too heavy. And I think our fire chief would defend that, and, you know, I think that number needs to be 4. So, that's just and the setback needs to change just a little bit too, on the side setback.
That would make some land, some lots undeveloped. If we get too happy with the setbacks, some of these lots are yay wide and 5
It's
acres
up to the
long.
developer though. He chooses how big he wants his lots to maximize his dollar he's invested in the property.
Would that not apply to an individual that bought a small lot, the setbacks?
Yeah.
Then he buys a lot that's X number of feet wide, but you putting 15-foot setbacks on his property, that's 30 foot off of his property. Maybe his property is only 60 feet or 70 feet wide, but he goes way back to acquire the acreage that he bought. You've just now made his property undevelopable.
Well, sometimes that's just the cost of doing business.
I mean, because the setbacks are too wide for him to build an
That's just the
adequate
cost
house.
that's just the cost. You find you another piece of property.
Okay.
Go ahead. I don't have the.
So one thing,
I'm
and
sorry.
one of the reasons I want to read this is, so, for example, we have too few, we'll say, retirement communities in the area, where it's true retirement home, where you're kind of being watched after, to an assisted living level, to a nursing home level type potential. The fourplexes on Kiwi School Road, great opportunity. I see that kind of development all throughout the state for somebody who truly wants a kind of a maintenance-free lawn, true retiree type home. That fourplex, where you've got several fourplexes in a community, you prevent that opportunity if we restrict density across the board, 100% through the county. They can no longer build those things. So I just want to make sure that we're not preventing things from being built.
Great point.
And that's the only reason I want to read it is the 20 acres might help, because even that Kiwi School Road example is under 20 acres. So, and that worked well. But it would restrict a developer from being able to do that on a larger scale. Do we want it? I don't know. But I'm just saying it's not just affordable, there's a whole lot of elements we have to think about of, do we need this and have we just prevented it from happening? And I just want to make sure that we're not doing something like that.
James,
But you don't know until you put the model out there for discussion.
That's why I say I'd love to see it.
The problem is we discuss, a lot of times we don't discuss we don't discuss a clear change, so this is a clear change.
That's why I
This
would
will
love
give
to
you
see
guys
it.
something to argue,
Yep.
something to argue over and determine.
Or to,
Does it
to
work or
find,
does it
to
not?
turn into a fine point, right?
Sure.
Put both items as one, as a dual discussion on both items at one, you know what I'm saying? That way, it'll just be one agenda item, but we discuss both of them together because they are so tightly tied together.
And also give Tom something to think about.
And, and ask Mr. Root, would he please attend the meeting? Okay. Anything further on this? Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Motion to adjourn.
All in